So if I was a stricker, I would be separating this.
Yes, into it.
And the manageable handfuls,
Manageable
essentially.
portions for
Right.
the...
And you've got down in the bottom pan here, I can tell from here, they look like pig's trotters.
That's exactly what they are, Joe.
This is the more modern version.
They brought home a big golden Labrador. That time there was right few hens about. And the dog ate a full bucket of eggs.
I don't believe you.
He did.
Well, you've got to make them stand out in the rain. A real Highland fair, they would have stood out in the rain regardless.
I'll give you £2 for him.
Right.
Deal? Come with me.
Hello? Aye, hold on a wee minute here. This spot's taking photographs of me.
I've studied the map long and hard. I've even resorted to the use of a ruler. And I still cannot tell whether the townland of Ballinahay is bigger than the adjoining townland of Cranlum. I think that Clintafallow is the smallest, though that might be disputed by the people who live in Achantubber, Mullasilla or Ballyward. It's all a bit academic anyway, because one thing I am certain of, having spent time amongst the dwellers of this drumland country, is that the importance of any townland is not derived from its size. Because locked into the evocative music of names such as Fasglusha, Drumnafairn or Tullyvannon is the fierce pride, unique identity and sense of belonging of the people who live there. And these are things beyond measure. Welcome to Killeeshil and Clonaneese in the south of County Tyrone. The tarmac has only just cooled on that section of the new A4 dual carriageway that runs from Ballygolly to Dungannon, traversing as it does so the 4 miles and 62 townlands of Killeeshil and Clonaneese. The double-barrelled name suggests the union of 2 distinguished families, and it is indeed a deliberate embrace by its own inhabitants of the different religious traditions who share that space, that sense of place, and the pride of belonging to a deeply rooted community. The verdant braes of South Tyrone go on about their business in timeless fashion, heedless of all changes save for those dictated by the seasons, whilst in their midst the outposts of industry gleam like alien craft from a brave new world. A drumland's width away from that busy highway, and the country lanes are fringed with cow parsley, buttercups, and the kinds of grasses whose seed used to be dispersed by the idle hands of children on long summer walks. While such summers might require a conscious effort of memory, not so the customs and practices of a bygone age that are joyously recollected in communal gatherings which celebrate the legacy of previous South Tyrone centuries. It is empowering and life-enhancing to look back at hard times that no longer have you in thrall. But whether the gap in the hedge affords a view of modernity or a heritage still valued and preserved, Brendan Holland is very much at home among the hedgerows and fields of his beloved parish. I'm visiting Brendan because he's a mine of information about the area, but he knows with a kind of stoic resignation that we must first deal with the obvious disparity in our respective heights, lest that distracts from everything else of interest he has to tell us. He's used to that by now. Brendan suffers from a condition known as gigantism, the result of a tumour on the pituitary gland. It's a serious and potentially life-threatening condition which Brendan has learned to live with ever since he was a young teenager.
I was extremely lucky in many ways, Joe. I went to work as a 19-year-old in London, and I had dreams of going to university, but I was feeling so terribly ill that I didn't really fancy, and I thought the studying had something to do with that. But I went to London just for a change of scenery, and I suppose, if I'm being honest, I wanted to be more anonymous because, you know, when you're young in that age and all the other things that you think are important, which aren't really important, you stood out from the crowd, and you know, without meaning to, you did draw attention to yourself. So
Basically, you were sick of people gawping at you, I suppose.
That sort of thing, that reaction, and most people with this condition have that experience. There's no doubt. But by going to London, I ended up being in the best place possibly I could be in the world to get treatment and proper, you know, expert medical assistance. You know, so I had my treatment in '72 when I was 20 years old, and I've been on a drug regime ever since. And well, Touch wood, Joe, I'm still here.
Touch wood, you're still here. I mean, the side of it that you alluded to there now, that maybe people might not be aware of it, I mean, apart from the extra growth, it also made you ill in other ways as well too, didn't it? I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. At the moment, I suffer from cardiac arrhythmia, which is a common side effect of it. Which means that if I go on long walks, which I hope you won't be up and dragging me down up in the hills of Killeeshil Clonaneese.
Not too far away to the house, no.
But yeah, I would get out of breath quite easily.
So you got to take care of your health.
Yes, I do. I'm very lucky to have somebody who does look. I have a very good wife who looks after me very well.
It's not a distinction that he would have chosen for himself, but Brendan, you could say, is part of a tradition of Irish giants, some of whom, like Cornelius McGrath, Patrick Cotter or Charles Byrne, carved out quite illustrious careers for themselves as Irish giants back in the 18th century. He is in fact genetically related to Charles Byrne.
There is a theory, in fact, Joe, that in fact we proportionately have more giants than, say, Scotland, England and Wales do.
Is this because there was one individual way back that people have referred to, possibly living 1,500 years ago or even longer than that, from which this rogue gene, as it were, has come from? Is that the case?
The rogue gene is called AIP. Don't ask me what it stands for. It's a jaw-breaking medical term, but basically what it means is that we think, according to the people who are experts on the history of genetics, that someone actually had this rogue gene in their system, and he is the progenitor of it, and it's been handed down through generations. It's not necessarily the same person, it could be two people, but there is a strong school of thought that would say that, you know, that the East Tyrone, South Derry area is strongly connected with that, and we have evidence of that even in old graveyards and things like that. Where
Charles Byrne came from Tyrone as well, isn't it?
He did. He came from the modern day area of Ballinderry.
Ballinderry, yeah.
Yes, right on the Tyrone-Derry border.
A short life was really the lot of quite a number of those so-called Irish giants.
Yes, very few of them actually survived past the mid-20s, mid to late 20s.
Well, you're doing okay so far, anyway.
Well, I'm over 20, Joe.
Well, just slightly over it, isn't it?
Yes, slightly over.
Well,
right.
me, you have many long years ahead of you.
Well, thank you so much.
And you've stopped growing anyway now, haven't you?
Oh, I think so.
You think so?
Yeah, I think I'm growing down now, Joe.
You think so? I think that happens to us all eventually.
Yes.
With a degree of relief, I'm sure, Brendan can now turn his attention to other matters, in particular to that tradition, which I've referred to on earlier occasions, of engineering innovation in South Tyrone. Brendan himself, from his base in Killeeshil, deals in mining and quarrying equipment all around the world. The huge Swedish-owned Sandvik plant on the A4 might look a bit incongruous amid the drumlins, but its roots go back to the endeavours of some entirely homegrown original thinkers who've become Brendan's heroes.
The area has spawned some of the greatest innovators and entrepreneurs in the engineering industry in probably the Western world.
Inventors, in other words.
Inventors, yes, inventors. You know, alternative thinkers. Call them what you want.
Yeah.
The greatest example of that was a man called John Finlay, and everyone will be familiar with Finlay's, which is that great big building on the A4, on the old A4. And you know, you couldn't talk about this area without mentioning John Finlay. Now, currently today, you know, Sandvik, her Swedish company, a multinational, have taken over the Finlay operation. Terex, an American multinational, have taken over the power screen operation. But we have several sons, daughters, grandsons and granddaughters and great-grandchildren of those two founding companies.
So an awful lot of other wee firms and individuals and subcontractors have spread out.
Yes.
And
they're still feeding these huge multinationals with small components of these machines. This area now produces the vast majority of screens. Now, screens are grading machines for aggregate, so they grade them by size. And for the quarry and mining industry, they're an essential part of actually the process of quarrying and mining.
And is it true to say, I mean, that all would have come probably from a very, very basic kind of way of using aggregate to make concrete, and then that somebody else came along, like that's John Finlay came along, saw a quicker, a better, or faster, more efficient way of doing it, and so on.
John started making blocks in a wooden mould.
Yeah.
Just shoveling the concrete into it and making a 4-inch block, the standard 4-inch block that we all use in the north here. And he went to England and took a friend of his with him, and they looked at a machine that was being made there by a company in Bristol. And he had this great ability to look at something and understand immediately how it worked, and the mechanics and whatever of it. And he just came back and he built a better one, twice as good as the one he saw.
Just from seeing the thing
Just
working?
from seeing it, yes. Just from seeing it. And you know, with no great fanfare, because the man was very, very much quiet, almost introverted individual. And when he talked, he almost whispered to you. I didn't know him that closely personally, but he used to come into my wife's aunt's pub, and my wife used to serve him, and he used to sit there and having a drink, and quiet, lovely man, very, very, you know.
A modest genius?
A modest genius, absolutely. A modest genius, yes.
Brendan is by no means alone in acclaiming the achievements of those who laid the foundations and formed the character of much of present-day Killeeshil and Clonaneese. I've come here during a week in which the local historical society is making intensive preparations for the staging of a traditional 19th century event, the Cotton's Corner Country Fair. A few last-minute details remain to be put in place, but the forthcoming fair will be all the more meaningful if we first get a proper feel for the place, its history and its people, when we come back. Round about 240 years ago, a mill race was dug to provide water to power a corn mill at Killeeshil. Unfortunately, it was dug within 6 feet of the Presbyterian meeting house at Clonaneese, which left the building, low down as it was, liable to flooding. Money was collected to rebuild and raise the building up, but at that stage the Reverend John Bridge and the majority of the congregation decided to move to higher ground, and Upper Clonaneese Presbyterian Church was built. Not everybody was happy to move, and so the congregation, as was the wont of Presbyterian congregations, split into two. The designation lower and upper, by the way, doesn't refer to their respective heights above mill race level. By a neat irony, the old church in the low ground became part of Lower Tyrone Presbytery, and the new church on the high ground was a member of the Upper Tyrone Presbytery. They're all friends again now, of course, but the mill that unwittingly started the whole affair is still in existence and, incredibly, still working, thanks to the efforts of this man. When Harold Bennett took over his grandfather's mill with a view to refurbishing it, it had been lying derelict for 50 years and was simply falling to pieces.
The mill was built in 1770.
1770?
Yeah, in the reign of George III. The building is completely original. Timber and all is original. It was never interfered with.
Never interfered with.
My grandfather bought the mill in 1917 from a Colonel Burgess.
Right.
And it was a corn mill from 1770 right up until 1917.
Right. So it became a Scotch mill after that, after your grandfather?
Yes.
Right.
The flax industry was booming during the First World War. And my grandfather promptly converted the corn mill into a flax mill, or Scotch mill, whichever would you prefer. Just after the Second World War, the flax industry took a nosedive, and with the introduction of man-made fibre.
Right.
So this mill closed.
So in 1951 it was closed altogether.
That's
and
right.
remained closed until very, very recently, really?
Yes, until, well, I started renovating it in 2000.
In 2000.
In 2008, had it up and running again.
So when you came back to renovate it or get it up and running again, it must have been in some sorry state at that stage. Would it have been closed for
yes, well,
50 years or so thereabouts?
Closed 50 years. I had to replace the belts, and I had to repurchase the engine and clean the place out. So the bird's nests and all the grime and dust that accumulated over 50 years.
Yeah. For the past 10 years and more, Harold has been labouring away on his own, out of his own pocket, mending, cleaning, refurbishing and replacing. He even tracked down the same 24 horsepower water-cooled single-cylinder diesel engine that his father had bought in 1943 when the mill race failed to provide enough water, and which he'd sold again in 1950 when the mill closed down. That now provides the power to do the scotching, which in layman's terms means breaking the outer husk of the flax plant to get at the fine strands inside, which will provide the fibres which will eventually be spun into linen thread. The first job was to crush the flax, which had already been retted, that is, soaked in water for up to a fortnight.
You know the thought that struck me, Harold, as you were putting that on through there? I wouldn't like to get my fingers or hands caught on that machine there.
Well,
it's a dangerous looking thing, isn't it?
It's a very dangerous piece of machinery.
Yeah.
No second chances.
Absolutely not.
You have to treat it with respect.
Yeah.
The flax, having been crushed, is then piled onto the trapdoor, which opens onto the scotching room down below. Here there are 7 berths, as they're called, in which the scotchers stood, and a table on which the strickers did their job. Getting complicated, and I haven't even mentioned the buffers yet. Harold will explain.
This is what the strickers would do.
So if I was a stricker, I would be separating this
Yes, into a
and the manageable handfuls,
manageable
essentially.
portions for
Right.
the.
Okay.
The stricker's job was to keep 2 scotchers supplied, and to keep each man's finished produce separate, as they were paid so much per stone weight.
There are 2 types of scotchers.
2 types of scotchers?
Yes, there was the buffer. He took the roof off it. And then there was the cleaner. He finished it.
What do you call the first type again?
A buffer.
A buffer?
Yeah.
Right. So you're going to
I'm a buffer.
buff it. You're going to buff it, right?
That's
Okay.
right, yeah.
And buffing did what exactly? Takes all the rough off.
It takes the outside off.
The outside off of the other.
Yeah. Now, the cleaner, he used
A different berth?
the top berth, yeah.
Top one, right?
Yep.
Although it appears to be the same action, the rotating handles, as they're called, are spaced closer together in the top berth.
Kind of swing it in there, don't you? I mean, force it in.
I'm not a good scorcher. I'm self-taught.
You're doing a fine job as far as that's concerned.
Self-taught.
Let's have a wee look at that. But it just shows you what amazing stuff flax actually is, doesn't it? Look at that. That's extremely tough.
Oh, you can't break it.
You can't break it.
Well then, every fortnight, the flax was taken to a flax market in Cookstown,
Right.
where it was graded by the grading inspector.
Right. So you have different quality of
Oh yes, it was graded from 1 to 6.
Right.
Now in this part of Tyrone, the grading was 3 or 4.
3 or 4.
Yes.
And does that depend on the quality of the original flax, how it was grown, or how it was handled, or what?
A combination.
Combination
Yes,
of that. So if you had top class crop, you wanted a top class Scotch multi-ticket too as well.
Well, the better the grade, the better the price.
You can tell that Harold Bennett has not only lovingly refurbished the mill and got it back in working order, he's also researched every aspect of its day-to-day workings. What a piece of living history he's provided for the education of local school children, and anyone else for that matter who wants to know something of the once all-important linen industry. Harold has laboured away on his own, as I've said, with only his pet miniature donkeys for company. Wouldn't it be nice if he could refurbish the water wheel as well? But that could only be made possible with the application of some old-fashioned know-how and some modern grant aid. When Enish Flax Mill closed down in 1950, Jimmy Lamont was a young man of 24. At the age of 85, he's still adept at manoeuvring the forklift among the farming and general merchandise that he dispenses from his premises just off the A4. He's had a lot of practice, because during the war years, when the mill would have been flat out, Jimmy would have been driving a tractor all over the country in the dark. The tractor belonged to a farmer Hodge, the man to whom Jimmy's fortunes were tied ever since he left school.
I started the business with Mr. Hodge at 14, farming. We farmed for so many years, and then he got a business 2 miles away here for a cousin of his, and he actually, through time, he brought it over here.
I see.
So then he had a sister living here, and I stopped on it all the time, and then she died very young. with the result there's only the two of us.
So you went to work for him straight out of school when you were
Oh,
14
I was
years
14,
old?
14
Right.
years of age.
And he worked on the farm, first of all?
Yes, he had about 100 acres here, and he had one of the wee grey tractors, and I ploughed in the night time, and that was during the war, and he ploughed in the daytime.
Get away. So you had to keep
On
it
the
going
country.
round the whole clock?
Going round the whole country.
Was that because there was so much demand from the war?
Well, you see, there were very few tractors that time. There was a man down here, a neighbour here in the name of Conde. He bought one. There were two paddle ones.
Right.
First in the market, and you had steel wheels. There's no rubber wheels.
Get away with that.
You had a band that you put on the wheel and drive them on the road.
Well, so you were driving a tractor, but you weren't driving it when you were aged 14, were you?
Oh, did.
Were you? Serious?
Sure.
Right.
That was against the law, but there was very little law that time. It was to get the work done.
Understand.
On the line. Well, then the next thing is that's cousin that he bought the shop off. He turned about and he brought the shop out to the side of the road here.
Right.
On the side of the road.
And what kind of stuff was he selling back
The
then?
very same as I'm selling today, general merchant, everything.
Right.
I went on ahead till 1970, but when the two of us was together, he decided that he'd give me the business when if I'd stay with him for 20 years, whether he'd make it good or bad.
He'd give you the business?
He'd give me the business or sell the business to me anyway.
Yes.
But finally, I bought the business off him in 1970, and I'm here today.
So he must have been, would it be fair to say this man was like a bit of a father figure to you?
Well, it was homely to me because there were 7 of us reared up in a house here, and there was the kitchen, the loft, and a bedroom, and there were 7 reared in it.
7 reared in.
There was no porch, no nothing, no toilet, no one. So then there was no room for me hardly at home at any time, so I never bothered. I was quite happy with him.
So I
stayed with him till I
stayed
got
with
married.
him? You boarded with him and everything?
I boarded with him and that.
Right.
The two of us worked away together there, and the biggest job we had was washing the dishes. It is a big job. I mind one time he went away to a dance and he brought home a big golden Labrador. That time there was a right few hens about, and the dog ate a full bucket of eggs.
I don't believe you.
He did. A full bucket of eggs.
You had a dog for company between the two of you?
That's right.
But the dog was no good at dishes either, no?
No, hopeless. So it didn't work out at all. No.
So you worked as ploughing away for a number of years, and then you went and worked at
into
the
the
shop.
grocery job.
And then you took to the roads at one stage, isn't that the case?
Oh, I was 13 years with the mobile unit. It carried everything. It carried meal, eggs and all complete. And during the rush of eggs, we had 100 cases of eggs coming in here.
So eggs would have been a big
Oh, well,
big seller,
the eggs paid for everything. Every hit was paid for. At the end of the week, I done, I suppose, about 300 houses. And at the end of the week, no money was owed.
Really?
Well, you see, the eggs was worth more than you could buy because the meal was all rationed. You couldn't get it.
Right. So eggs substituted for money, would that be the case,
did,
really?
they did,
Right, so
they
people
did.
paid for their goods
Well,
and eggs.
any man that had a grocery van on the road or anything, them years, they all worked the very same.
Right, so they took on eggs
They took any eggs
instead of money.
instead of money. The eggs was as good as any money.
But then you had to sell the eggs to other people, isn't that the
No,
case?
no. You had a wholesaler that turned about and put the eggs to England.
So the eggs
We
all...
give them till Kyoto, Porty down.
I see.
And he got them and then changed over then later years then till Dobson and the Moy.
It struck me as I listened to Jimmy's entertaining stories, which I did for another hour or so, that he himself is another example of living history, describing a livelihood, a lifestyle and a life that is far removed from everyday existence nowadays. Closer perhaps to the times to be depicted in the forthcoming Cotton's Corner Fair, in which Jimmy's grandchildren will be recreating their version of the past. Birdwatchers visiting Killeeshil and Clonaneese might be surprised to see a flock of racing pigeons circling the skies above the townland of Cranlum. If they keep watching, their eyes will be drawn to this house high up on the wooded hill, for it's here that the pigeons will alight. They are homing pigeons after all, and this is their home. It's also the home and the clinic of Francis and Geraldine Scullion, whose veterinary services for birds is at the cutting edge of research and treatment of all ailments that affect our feathered friends. They live deep in the Tyrone countryside, but their scientific expertise, not only in pigeons but in exotic animals and even fish, is acknowledged and sought out in all corners of the world. Serious pigeon fanciers who invest heavily in racing birds need to know how to get the best performance out of them, and this is where Francis and Geraldine come in. They can diagnose problems and apply treatments, a lot of it based on observation and research on their own flock.
Most pigeons would have a variety of organisms, bacteria, viruses, protozoa, and endoparasites like worms.
Right.
And these parasites and other organisms can cause them health problems at certain stages in their life.
Right.
But they live with the population of pigeons.
If you have a lot of pigeons, you're going to have these parasites and worms and things like that. Is that inevitable?
Yes,
is it?
They'll be there as part of the population. So they're normal organisms that live with the birds, and on occasions they'll cause them disease problems. Now,
Right.
diseases will occur in most populations related to environmental changes like weather and season and things like that there. And so those are called stress factors.
Right.
And anything is a stress factor really. As much as just keeping birds together could be a stress factor.
Right.
Breeding birds is a stress factor. So all these things will change the pattern as the year goes on of the numbers of parasites and things, and at some stage maybe they'll cause actual disease that you can see the birds are sick.
I see.
But in most cases with racing pigeons, you still don't notice them sick, but you'll notice in their racing ability.
So it's going to affect their...
Yes, so
their
in fact,
fly.
well, if you remember, Seb Coe, I think, was doing a big race in the Olympics, and he had a head cold.
Right.
And he didn't win because of his head cold.
Right.
So a simple thing like that can put an athlete off.
I
And it's the
see.
same with the pigeons.
So these would be things that are not necessarily visible. I mean, you would look at the bird and think it's grand and healthy. It looks okay. But it would be affecting it in ways that you can only tell through performance, isn't it?
Yes, it's the performance that affects mainly.
Okay. So when you're looking at for things, are you treating pigeons or are you just screening them to see if I mean...
We do both. Like, a pigeon fancier arrives with, and he tells us birds are sick and some are dying. We can do post-mortems and check out what they've been dying from. If they're sick, we can do clinical examinations. I'll show you what a clinical examination involves, basically, very quickly.
This is just like an ordinary stethoscope, yeah?
The same as your doctor will use to listen to your chest.
Right. He doesn't go, that's cold.
No.
So I can listen to the heart. I can listen to the air sacs.
So it's more than just...
And I can listen to the lungs.
Right. And does that sound fairly normal, that bird, at the moment, does he?
Sorry?
Does he sound normal, this bird here?
Yeah, so in birds, the main problem would be through their respiratory system, and you can hear noises in their lungs or their air sacs if they're having problems.
Right.
Now, also you can clinically examine them, you can check all their joints right down from their toes, their feet, their knee, their ankles, their hips. You can check both sides, you can check their abdomen, their pelvic bone, chest muscle, breastbone.
So every wee, I mean, obviously these are high performance birds, or they're supposed to be high performance birds. So any wee tiny thing that's off at all is going to definitely affect it, isn't it? Yes.
Yes.
Right.
And the more worrying thing is that it's a flock problem. It's not just usually
It's not just
you
one bird.
have a team of racing birds, and usually a problem that's affecting the loft will affect the whole team. So that's where you have to treat them as a flock as well.
So they infect each other very quickly, in other words, really.
Well, because they're all held together, same airspace, then that's one problem affect them
It's
all.
like a classroom of children. If one gets a cold, they nearly all get it, isn't it? The case?
Yeah.
This kind of clinical examination can take place if, of course, you have the bird in hand. But this is 21st century veterinary practice, and as often as not, Francis and Geraldine are microscopically examining swabs taken from birds hundreds of miles away and sent in a medium that preserves them.
The fancier can take swabs just with a cotton bud swab in the throat, but we tend to go a wee bit deeper into the crop,
which
is the first part of the gut.
I'm going to have sympathetic retching in a wee second or two.
But you see, the birds, when they were being reared in the nest, the mother fed them through Like,
of course, right.
Through her beak, she put her beak into their beak, so they're used to things going right down their throat. Not like
That's a natural process.
Okay, so you're taking swabs inside, is that the
just
idea?
go right down into the crop, which is, you can actually feel the crop here. So a lot of times people maybe will come in saying problems, the birds are crop's very watery, very full of water, and that can be a sign of disease.
Of something as well. I see. I mean, they're actually quite they're lovely birds.
They're nice birds, yeah. They don't bite. I mean, if this was a parrot, I wouldn't be holding it. Just as relaxed. With a parrot, you have to really hold their head, hold their beak, because otherwise it could bite right down to the bone. Take it off.
Of course, it's not just pigeons that the scullions treat. Anything from domestic pets to exotica like monkeys and reptiles. Up here in the screen, for example, is an X-ray of an 8-foot boa constrictor. And if you know what to look for, a pregnant 8-foot boa constrictor. And it's not just the veterinary aspect of pigeon fancying that's gone all high-tech and scientific. The clocks that used to time their flight and which had to be started and stopped by hand have now been replaced by an electronic chip that's fitted to the bird's leg and which registers its time when it passes over this machine. That saves the fancier having to actually catch his bird and physically remove what used to be a rubber band. But however sophisticated and scientific the veterinary side becomes, however high-tech the racing, for many fanciers, including the scullions I suspect, there'll always be something appealing to us humans about the bird itself.
Pigeons would have been, am I right in saying this, one of the earliest birds to be domesticated by man? Would that be the case?
I think they were, yes.
Thousands of years back.
Yes. They've been used actually for food. They've been used for, as you know, in the war. They were very useful as messenger pigeons, and some of them, I think they're some of the only animals that have got George medals and equivalent of, yes, because
for bravery.
For bravery, yes, in war.
Right.
So they've got great history, and it's thousands of years ago that people started to domesticate them. And like Jeremy said, they're very nice birds. They're not. There's very little damage they'll try to do to you.
Yes.
The worst they can do is maybe flap a wing and try to slap you. Basically,
even if they had a big beak, they wouldn't use it on you. You tend to think anyway. Yeah.
So the ancient practice of breeding pigeons is now greatly enhanced by cutting-edge technology. And here's an example of an ancient practice being ruined by cutting-edge technology. That's because I'm the one cutting the edge, and the man who is reckless enough to let me do it is the very accomplished Mark Dehan, a technology teacher by day and a craftsman in his South Tyrone garage in whatever time he's left to him. You can tell by the interior of Mark's house that he and the Princess Clara are extremely fond of things made with natural wood. Natural wooden staircase, wooden banisters, wooden doors, and this, a grandfather clock. This is one that he made himself without my help, so it's kind of well made. Mind you, he's been making them since his A-level days.
I went home from school and I was very frustrated, and I said to Mum, I says, I'm struggling to get a project here for A-level.
You had to make something.
You had to make something,
right?
And I have a client base, and she says, you know what, Mark? She says, I'd love a clock.
Right.
And I says, right, okay, what type of clock, Mummy? I'd love a grandmother clock.
A grandmother clock?
Grandmother clock.
Right. What's the distinction between a grandfather and a clock?
Probably the height. Grandmother clock would be between 5'5" and 6'5".
Just the size.
So it's just the size, more or less.
Right. Okay.
Probably that would be the main.
So the one you have in your hallway, that's a grandfather clock?
That's a grandfather clock.
Okay. In terms of your A-level project and your grandmother clock,
yes,
how did that turn out?
Well, I think my teacher nearly died when I went in and said, I want to make a grandmother clock. But actually, I have to say, I got great inspiration from him. He was a fantastic teacher. Pat Quinn.
Pat Quinn.
And he was fantastic, and probably that's why I'm teaching technology today.
So you owe it to him, really?
Well, I don't know if I owe it to him or not.
He doesn't take the blame for you.
No, he doesn't take the blame, no.
Right, but he obviously must have been a very good teacher, and he must have also encouraged you.
He was very, very good, and he took me in his free time to do the A-level.
Okay, so here we are. Your present project. This is pine, isn't that the case?
This is pine, yes.
And this is done. You tell me. These are
just floorboards at the back. Yeah.
Right. Basically floorboards, and that. You just tongue and groove kind of stuff?
Just tongue and groove, that's basically it, yeah.
Okay. See, I know all the technical terms.
Very good, Joe. I am very impressed.
And that, I think, is where Mark was misled. Any man who knows his tongue from his groove, he must have thought, would be able to manoeuvre a jigsaw. I doubt if he'll make that mistake again.
Stop there because I think we've gone off the line already.
I think so, yeah.
This is much more difficult than you were even letting on to me there now. Could you change the design a wee bit?
Well, I'm going to have to change the design a wee bit here, yeah.
Oh dear, right.
It's going to be a wee bit deeper.
Right.
Just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to turn the jigsaw as you go along. Yeah.
I've really made a mess of it now, but just start it again from here. Right. Okay.
The time lapse here, during which Mark had to take over, is to protect woodworkers of a nervous disposition.
Well, that's definitely a new design, yeah. Just a wee bit off, huh?
A wee bit off. It's kind of, is that rescuable?
Yes.
No, you're not just saying that.
I'm not just saying that. No.
It's rescuable?
It is, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but you're not cutting anymore.
Right. I warned you. I warned you. I told you beforehand. You know what it was? I couldn't see out of the glasses.
Couldn't see out of the glasses.
That's my excuse. Yeah. Actually, I think that's very nice.
It's not too bad, actually. Yeah.
Mark is nothing if not a good sport, even if he didn't appreciate my avant-garde, asymmetrical approach. As he said, grandfather clocks aren't supposed to be avant-garde. The rest of the assembly he'd made earlier, so it was relatively easy to put together, leaving only the clock mechanism to go in. In recompense for my vandalism, I offered to supply the hands of the clock. When we come back, we'll be turning the hands of the clock back about a century or two. Earlier in the week, I visited St Mary's Primary School along with Brendan Holland, where Mr Kelly, the school principal, was putting Mr McAnespi's Primary 7 class through some final preparations. You might think to look at them that this is just a class of ordinary children, but you're actually looking at a class of time-travelling actors, because come the weekend at the Cotton's Corner Fair, these children will be transformed into calloused farmers, grieving mothers, hired sons and daughters, narrators and onlookers. They're not just learning about herring fairs, they're going to take part in one.
So this is really, they're going to have to learn all about herring fairs in order to act in a herring fair. Mm-hmm. Very good.
And just before you go, Joe, somebody bring up a copy of this week's Tyrone Times and show what these boys and show Joe what they've done.
Oh, we're in the newspaper now, are we? Yes.
Robert, no, it's different now.
What's this different?
I hope we'll show them. We are the newspaper.
Oh, excuse me. Life at St Mary's Primary School, Canberra.
School newspaper. I was out on Tuesday there.
Really?
Around 2 months of work.
So this is all your own work?
Yeah. Yes.
Excellent.
24 pages, colour spread.
So you weren't exaggerating when you said this is the best class you ever had at this school?
It's a good class.
This is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Possible to get a copy of this now, is it?
Oh, they all sold out in the area yesterday, but...
And these are all the wanted posters?
There's a remarkable collaboration afoot here between the Killeeshil and Clonaneese Historical Society and the staff and pupils of St Mary's. It's a pooling of knowledge, talents, energies and values, which will ensure that future generations will have a very clear sense of who they are, where they come from, and, you'd like to think, where they're going in life.
Okay, ready? What do we look like? How do we look? Not too bad, don't. I want sad. I want a major sad. Where's my farmers?
Hey, can you lift turf? What about the spuds? Good job. You two for sale. Can you look after the baby? Take a wee walk there.
However elaborate and painstaking the preparations for the reenactment of this 19th century traditional fair, there's one aspect of the day that nobody could plan for: the weather. It rained practically non-stop, and while it might have added a bit of authenticity to the hiring fair and helped the method actors get in the mood, it did nothing to dampen the spirits or the festive atmosphere.
Too kind.
All conceivable rural crafts and skills and activities were on display.
And traditionally, your milk was gathered, or cream was gathered over 2 or 3 days, and then it was probably sour. So if you smell that, it should smell like yogurt. and that's when it was ready to churn. So you would have gathered that over 3 or 4 days. You have to remember, everybody had a cow. Even people in villages had a cow.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it took 3 or 4 days to gather enough cream to make butter.
I see.
Well then, by that time it was sour. So traditionally, country butter was made with sour cream.
That's why it had that wee extra strong
taste.
taste.
Yes.
I see, right.
Under a nearby tree, Chef Emmett McCourt had even reconstructed an open hearth fire, over which he was cooking some traditional fare. Emmett's working on a book with the kind of cookery, some of it surprisingly sophisticated, that was possible with the bare minimum that was available even in the poorest of circumstances.
So obviously very authentic that they used to have 150 years ago, you know. But
turf fire and everything.
Yeah, turf fire and all.
And that would have been sufficient to cook anything here above it.
Yeah.
Enough heat from that.
Yeah. There was actually great skill involved in the pot oven, you know, where they cooked the breads, you know.
Yes.
Replacing whatever turf, you know, was warmest, you know, and to prevent it from burning, you know.
Yeah.
So
and you've got down in the bottom pan here. Yeah. I can tell from here they look like pig stradders.
That's exactly what they are, Joe. Pig stradders. Yeah.
You call them something else as well.
Well, I mean, I suppose it's my interpretation. They're crabines. Irish and crabines, you know.
Crabines,
crabines, but they're actually stuffed, you know, so with like a chicken mousse, you know. But they're very good, you know.
All right. And on the pan here, you've got mackerel, obviously.
We've got the mackerel and the cured herrings and the smoked herrings as well in this pan, you know, which they used to eat a lot of too, about 150 years ago, you know. So
you've made a special study of the kinds of foods. Isn't that the case?
That's right.
That people cook back. Really, what were you saying? Since the time of the famine onwards?
Time of the famine. Well, actually, I'm in the process of doing a book, researching for a book, you know.
Yeah.
And it's an historical cultural food journey of the northwest of Ireland, you know. But
an historical cultural food journey.
Food journey,
right.
And that traces the food heritage, if you like, back from the famine times right up to present day.
These are the kind of foods then that would have been available to poor people, essentially. Is that the case?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
I mean, the pork product there, you know, anything to do with the pork, everything but the squeak they used, you know.
Right.
We had the herons, which were very, very much abundant around our coastline.
Yeah.
Potato bread, the oats as well was another great produce, you know.
When you bring your book out, then people will be trying to recreate some of these dishes from the past. That's their hope, anyway.
That's the outcome, anyway. That's the hope, you know. Again, it's about celebrating the food heritage that we have, the rich food heritage that we have, you know.
Yes. So you're still in the process of doing that?
Still in the process. It should be ready in a couple of years' time, you know. So.
We could all be starving to death in a couple of years' time. Before that.
Well, you can try one of them pig's feet now.
I'll try that then, definitely.
You know, so.
Right. Wee donkey's lovely.
He says to Dad, I hope they don't ask me for change.
Did you get a photo?
60 and a halfpenny. Is that what the actual prices would have been back in them days?
That's what we were debating before we came down.
I would say you'd have bought an acre for 3D back in them days.
Yeah.
Very good. Anyway, that poor donkey standing out in the rain.
In a community that seems to grow local historians like daisies, I would hazard a guess that few of them know more about the townlands of Killeeshil and Clonaneese than Raymond Cuddy, the very man to unravel for us the various threads that are woven into this rich fabric of a name.
This is where it could get slightly complicated, right? Killeeshil is a name of the parish, but there's also a Killeeshil townland in the middle of that parish. And that Killeeshil townland, you correct me when I get this wrong, was in the part of this area called Clonaneese.
That's correct.
Which isn't a parish in its own right. It's a collection of townlands.
It's a collection of townlands. It must have been some sort of administrative area back in the year 1500s.
I see.
Because it was in existence in the early 1600s and kept its name through by the names of the Presbyterian churches. They used that name instead of the Killeeshil parish name.
So you've come to this nice agreement where you call the area now Killeeshil and Clonaneese.
Yes, that includes all communities, the civil parish of Clonaneese, the civil parish of Killeeshil, the Catholic parish of Killeeshil, which is bigger than the civil parish, and then the Clonaneese area as well. So we include everybody's included there.
I was looking at the map of it now the other day there, and I think there's about over 40 in the Catholic parish of Killeeshil, and some wonderful sounding townland names. And I know you're a great man for the townland names yourself.
I'm very fond of the townlands. They have a great history. They go back thousands of years. Those names, and no matter what religion you are, they're there. You live in the townland. You don't live on a road. You live in a townland.
You live in a townland. I was able to mention several of them earlier on, I think, but I'm not sure if I got yours or not. Yeah, I think he asked me that I mentioned a certain one. What was it again?
Townland of Gorey.
Townland of Gorey. Well, this is now officially the mention of the Townland of Gorey, of which this man is a very proud inhabitant. Is that the case?
Thank you very much, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I couldn't leave the fair without saying a congratulatory farewell to one of the stalwarts of Killeeshil and Clonaneese Historical Society, the woman whose generous hospitality made my stay here a thoroughly pleasant and well-fed experience, Marie Quinn.
The one thing is everybody's smiling, and that's the main thing.
Everybody's going to apologising for the weather, but I don't see anybody with any glum faces.
No, absolutely not.
And I think it actually added a wee bit of authenticity to the hiring fair scene.
Well, that's it. The weather's always bad.
Those children didn't have to act miserable at all.
They didn't.
Just standing there on their bare feet. Foundered.
Foundered, that's right.
Is this something you were trying to recreate again?
Well, I hope it's something that we'll be able to follow on, and maybe later in the year when the weather might be better.
Yes. I believe this time last year you had a terrific outing.
Yes, we had a hog roast and we had a picnic down at Bennett's Mill, two great occasions.
And that wee meadow just behind the...
That's right.
That must have been lovely.
It was beautiful, Nigel.
You fairly know how to enjoy yourself doing Killeeshil and Clonaneese, don't you? Right.
That's right.
So, I hope if you have this event again, the weather will be a wee bit nicer. I would be delighted to come back and visit it again.
Well, that would be great, Joe. You'll be so welcome. I think everybody in Killeeshil now knows you.
Well, I know everybody in Killeeshil, I think, by this stage, because he's walking down here. It took me half an hour to get through all the crowds.
And of course, I have to say Clonaneese now.
Clonaneese. Killeeshil and Clonaneese. We can't leave one without the other. That's it.